Shattering Myths. We have Kirk on the line, and as I understand it, Kirk, from Scott, that you have a few questions that you would like. So this is going to be Stump the Yada.
Stump the Yada. Well, most of these are rather rhetorical when you think about it, but it's...
Oh, okay. So you're saying, what you're telling me is if these questions stump me, that I need another cup of coffee.
Well, that's probably just pour some more and keep going. So
okay.
This weekend is wonderful, and it was also
tragic,
bad, because every time you turn on something on television is Easter and so forth, and every time
even at sporting events, they kept on saying, happy Easter, what a wonderful Easter Sunday, and you just want to, it makes me.
Well, there's the Easter Bunny on the golf. Yeah, you got the Easter Bunny all over the golf course, and
right.
Come on, people, grow up.
Come on, yeah, I know. How can so many people be so stupid?
Well, they obviously don't think it means anything one way or the other. Otherwise, half of them, I'm sure, would think again. But I wrote down.
Well, think again. Now that's way too kind.
Is it?
Yeah, because that infers that the people celebrating Easter have thought in the first place.
Oh well.
If they were thoughtful, they wouldn't be celebrating. They wouldn't be celebrating. We don't really have to. This is not a multiple thinking deal. The moment you start thinking, you stop being religious. So.
Well, before I ask you the question, I'll toss out some things. One thing in particular in Torah 23, where it says you're summoned to these related appointment meeting times of Yahowah, not of the Jews, but of Yahowah.
Right, of Yahowah.
For the purpose of understanding. Which certainly.
And by the way, the Hebrew word for understanding is byn. B-Y-N. Yeah. Now let's just think of that for a moment. B-Y-N. And you know what the primary meaning of the word is understanding. You know what the secondary meaning of that word is?
Not really.
Yeah. This happens to be, the aha moments that you have along the way where you just say, oh man, God is really, really smart. I recognized a long time ago, and I don't claim to have many skills, but there's one thing I've always thought that I was pretty good at. There's only one thing I think I'm pretty good at. That doesn't mean I'm good at it, so maybe I'm just flattering myself. There's one thing I think I'm pretty good at, which is I see the connections between things that most people miss. And this transition from knowing to understanding is primarily by making connections between things, understanding the relationship between things, cause and effect, for example. So now that I've told you that the primary meaning of byn in Hebrew is to understand, you want to take a stab at what the secondary meaning of the word is?
How about make connections?
Between things, exactly.
Yes.
That's exactly what it means. So Yahowah is telling us in the Word what the process is to understanding, how you go about transitioning from knowing to understanding. That's by making connections. It's, when you can look at things and filter out what's true, which is not true by probability, or you're able to say these things are consistent, these things are inconsistent. Consistent and inconsistent things don't fit together. That's all by making connections. By associating Pesach with what Yahowah says it was for, which is to spare the lives of the firstborn children. And who was the firstborn child of Abraham, according to Yahowah?
Isaac.
Yeah, Isaac. He was the first child of the covenant, isn't he?
Yes.
Yeah. So to spare the firstborn children, I'm going to spare the children of the covenant. That's making a connection, isn't it? Now, if you don't connect those two stories, then you don't understand. So understanding is always by making connections. So Yahowah is telling us that these invitations that he's offering are designed to encourage us to understand by making connections between them and the covenant.
Well, he also, the family-oriented covenant is usually represented by a B. And
by the way,
but I happen to know this one, so it was easy. But you have, if you connect the dots between the two things that are connected in the word, it's three letters. You've got a family home On one side of it, you have a yod, which represents Yahweh reaching down to help us, and you have an inheritance or the seed, not the seed, but the sperm again, which is the inheritance of the family.
Right.
And so you're connecting the home with them, connected by Yahweh. So yeah,
it is my conclusion, and I think you would concur with this. I am most certain Yahweh would concur with this. Once you come to understand the covenant, once you transition from knowing who Yahweh is, knowing what He is asking of us, knowing what He is offering to us, and you come to understand these things, then there isn't anyone who has transitioned to understanding who doesn't accept the deal.
Mm-hmm.
It's the best deal ever offered.
Absolutely.
So since it's the best deal ever offered, there's not a single negative associated with this deal. It's not just positives. It's the most amazing positives that we can even fathom. So once you understand the covenant, you're part of the covenant. I mean, there's no one in this universe that has taken the time to and made the jump between knowing and understanding the covenant that isn't part of it. So bien is the perfect word to describe the pathway to being the child with an inheritance in Yahweh's family, lifted up by Yahweh's hand. I mean, that is the basis of the covenant. Understanding is the basis. And this is a big deal to me, because the reason it's such a big deal to me is that I'm not a touchy-feely guy. Yahweh's not a touchy-feely God. We are both driven. His just happens to be incalculably superior to mine, but we're both driven by evidence and reason. We're both driven by, you first got to come to know and understand before you should engage emotionally. And so when Yahweh bases the approach to His covenant on the Hebrew word for understand, based on making connections, for me it's like, oh, well, that's why Torah means teaching.
Mm-hmm.
It's just, the light goes off. It's so reassuring. It's so affirming. And all those people, saying that, that they believe, and I'm saying, no. Yahweh has no use for belief. Understanding is the antithesis of belief.
Yeah, and you understand what you know.
Yeah, that's right.
Hope.
Right. There's no faith, no belief, no hope. It's total and complete conviction and understanding. What a superior way that Yahweh has to go about it. I was writing an agnostic over the weekend, and I said, if you're an agnostic, chances are you like evidence and reason. And if you like evidence and reason, you will like Yahweh and His approach.
How do you go with him? Did he?
I left it with that we began this over an Easter conversation and on secularism and him talking about his background and I said, listen, I'm going to lay it out who God is and what He wants and what He's offering, but to go any further, it has to be at your initiation. All I will tell you is that virtually everyone that I know, the vast majority of those that I know that are now part of the covenant, at some time in their life passed through agnosticism.
Mm-hmm.
And so I said, my guess is that, in fact, I can say with certainty, if you explore this, you'll come to like God and His approach. But it has to be at your initiation. So we'll see if I'll meet with him here later this week. We'll see if he initiates. If he doesn't, but my whole approach to this, and I'm glad we're talking about this because I get more letters on this than anything else.
Okay.
My approach is you throw out some hints. Mm-hmm. If somebody says Happy Easter, I'm not going to respond, yeah, Happy Easter to you. I'm going to say, no, I don't, nothing happy about Easter. I'm not going to celebrate it. And then I will throw out some hints that put them in a position that if they're interested, they will initiate a conversation. If they're not, I'm wasting my time. All I'm going to do is antagonize them to engage in conversation. So I always throw it out. It's their initiative, and I'll reinforce that in the discussion.
I'm totally on the same page. That's all you can do.
Okay, you're working towards a question, and I keep on interrupting.
Well, I was thinking over, because of everything we hit upon that, so over the weekend and everything, and then I was thinking about Yahowah and Yosha. Obviously, I mean, I don't want to sound ridiculous, but obviously there was never a time when they didn't endorse the Torah. They never changed their mind, and so forth.
Yahowah is the voice of the Torah. He is the Torah, and Yosha is the living embodiment of the Torah. Yosha was wholly and completely, irrefutably Torah observant and Torah supportive.
And they've asked you and I and everyone else to Shema Torah, right?
To observe.
And that message has never changed. They've never asked you to go anywhere else.
Right.
And then towards the end, and the description of the one that Christians call Antichrist, which is a terrible term because they should have called him what Yahowah called him, the Toraless one.
Correct.
Because that would define him.
Correct.
If you're Antichrist and you can define Christ, then your Antichrist can be...
Christians can't call him the Toraless one because that would make them all qualified because they're all Toraless.
Yeah, exactly. So I made, so I was just jotting down some names on rhetorically on who, if any of these people were pro the Torah, and obviously the first one I put on my list was the one who founded this religion called Christianity, Paul.
Yeah, and I think that Paul is actually the perfect. There's probably 5 or 6 people in human history that are ideal prototypes for the Toraless one. If you want to know what the one that Christians call the Antichrist is going to be like, Paul, his ego, his statements, his whole approach, his personality, his issues, his style, every part of Paul is the epitome of what the Toraless one is going to be like.
Well, and to continue on, if I may, so I went to all the religious leaders to influence all the people around the country because, we're walking, we feel sometimes like, at least I do, I feel like I'm walking against this great windstorm. I'm plodding my way and everything's going the opposite direction. And so I was saying, well, where'd all this come from besides just Paul and old Babylonian stuff? And I hear your music, so if you want, we'll just continue.
Yeah, we'll continue after the break. We also have Glenn, and I'm sure he wants to contribute to this as well, so that'll be great. But, yeah, it is true that the one that the Christians call the Antichrist will be exactly like them because he will be Toraless, as are they. Hello, welcome back to Shattering Myths. We have Glenn on the line. Before Kirk, you get your question posed. Let's hear what Glenn has to say and respond to his either comment or question. Hello, Glenn.
Hey, guys. Good morning, Kirk. Good morning, Anna. You guys are talking about understanding, and I wanted to, put a point on that and illustrate the concepts a little bit. And this has come up before. We talked about, and just even the word understand, if you look out, it's one thing to, like, say, see a tree in the distance, but when you stand under the tree, you understand it. You're right up there, and you've got a close and personal. But more importantly, like, there's the notion of knowing a fact versus understanding it. And then furthermore, there's the distinction between knowledge and wisdom. And I was thinking a good metaphor for this is, it's one thing to know the level 5 hurricane, to see on the news that a level 5 hurricane is about to hit your area. It's another thing to understand, and basically I'd say understanding has to do with grasping the implications of a piece of knowledge, of a fact. In other words, you understand that the implications of a fact that a level 5 hurricane is coming, the implication is of what's going to happen is that you're going to have building damage and power outages, flooding, things like that. So you understand, you grasp the implications of what the facts mean. So, okay, because this is true, this is going to happen, and this is going to happen, it implies, this fact implies that this is going to happen. Now, once you understand what is implied, then you have to make choices about what you're going to do, and choice-making is the essence of wisdom. Okay, so there's knowledge, understanding, and wisdom. Wisdom cannot be demonstrated apart from the making of choices. Okay, so you have the facts, you know the facts, You grasp their implications and thusly understand, and then once you understand, then you're able to employ, if you have wisdom and are not fool, then you can begin to make choices. So choice is the essence of wisdom. We know people are wise because of their personal histories and the choices they made. When we see people who have made wise choices, made good choices, we say they are wise. So there's knowledge, understanding, and wisdom.
And that's the way that the covenant is set up, though. I mean, God, Yahweh doesn't ask you to know everything to start with. He wants you to start the dialogue or start to understand, and then you make your decision. So that's absolutely accurate.
Yeah. It starts with knowledge, and knowledge will lead to understanding.
Understanding has to do with the implications of facts, and wisdom has to do with choices made.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I would go along with that, and that you would say in this regard that making a rational, moral, logical deduction from the evidence and your understanding of the evidence is what separates those who know from those who are wise.
The knowledge is just facts, and understanding has to do with knowing implications.
It's like scholars know lots of facts, but they seem to possess very little understanding of them and almost no wisdom.
Mm-hmm.
Right, exactly. Yeah, I mean, you also spoke of about Yahowah, being, putting truth above feelings, if you will, And
yes.
I bumped into a Christian friend of mine I haven't seen her over 10 years over the weekend, and family's been through some tragic occurrences and stuff like that. And we're discussing, being the Easter weekend, or they call it maybe Resurrection Sunday, if they're at least aware that Ishtar is utterly pagan. And, as I started to discuss these issues, about Yahowah and Yahshua name and Passover and these sorts of things, and, the deceptions that are, foisted upon us by the church and stuff. Mm-hmm. And this woman who is, a very strong and caring person, psychosocially, very strong, survived these things. And, but, devout Christian, I was affiliated with a specific non-denominational group that's fairly large. But she's also like this very, touchy-feely, person, and she's, and when confronted with doctrinal issues, she's like, well, I'm not feeling the love. It's all, about love. And it's like, actually, the truth is more important than the subjective personal feelings. She didn't like that concept. And she said, well, I'm glad I'm not where you are. And I'm like, again, which is, kind of a mean thing to say. I said, well,
faith and feelings are very similar concepts. Yeah, faith and feelings, very similar. And so many people justify their faith based on their feelings.
Yeah,
and when they haven't moved an iota from faith when they're dealing with their feelings. But yet their feelings are used to justify that which is without knowledge and understanding. We'll be back. Welcome back to Shattering Myths. We have Glenn and Kirk on the line. Kirk, you were about ready to ask a question. We'll get Glenn's response.
I was on my Torah list that I was making because I was defining. Obviously, we established. It's easy to establish that Yahowah and right through Yahushua comments are totally Torah-oriented, and so I was going through the Torah list ones, and I started with Paul, and when Glenn called, I was starting to think about also on my list right here was below Paul was the Billy Grahams and the Oral Roberts and the I skipped to the 20th century to the local popes to the 20th century, and even the mega churches like old Joel, what's his face, with his mega church wherever it is.
Oh yeah. And in fact, Rich Warren would be high on that list. The guy that wrote Chrislam as the integration of Christianity and Islam, and who favors himself a politico, and goes off to Washington to bask in the glow of the nation's capital. Yeah, he'd be high on that list. Jimmy Swaggart, James Baker. Yeah.
But when Glenn called, and of course when you think about it, without that emotional tug, without that emotional responsibility that they do in speech making, and you've taken speech classes and you've read speech books, I have.
Yeah, I used to compete in speech. I used to compete extemporaneous, impromptu, and debate.
Debate.
Yeah, that was the. Well, I played every sport known to man in high school. The one sport, it's not really a sport, but the one thing that I actually excelled at, 'cause I don't excel at much, was impromptu, extemporaneous speech, and because we used to eat and debate. Those were things that I had a proclivity for. So yes, I've done them and enjoyed them, but in those things, emotion doesn't prevail. It is if you look at those who have garnered an enormous base of support.
Yeah.
They all blend the written word and the spoken word, and they find that the spoken word is far more emotionally compelling. Adolf Hitler, for example, realized that Mein Kampf would provide a foundation for his new religion and his rise, but ultimately he was going to motivate people through the spoken word because it was much more emotional, and people don't think as much when the word is spoken to them.
Yeah, well, none of these empires, these little empires that these people have built, could possibly be without it.
Correct.
They just draw the crowd in, and
right.
And so, but my point.
Billy Graham with his unique accent and his style. Yeah, he was spellbinding in his presentation. People would go because he was so spellbinding because he had such a unique style. Adolf Hitler was able to mesmerize hundreds of thousands of people at an event with his rehearsed gestures and voice inflection. So yeah, it's very common throughout history.
So beyond a shadow of a doubt, these would fall in the category of the Torahless ones. Yet Christians follow them by the millions and billions. I mean, it's just.
You look at Paul when you read his letters. When he was in front of a community of people, he was able through his preaching to persuade them. And then you read his letters, and you find that the moment that his words were no longer reverberating in their heads, and they started to think, that they all moved away from him. I mean, Galatians is written to a group of people who had listened favorably to Paul and then completely rejected him. I mean, he calls them every derogatory name under the book. I mean, he just despises the Galatians for turning on him. And if you read 1st and 2nd Corinthians and 1st and 2nd Thessalonians, Paul's first 5 letters were all written to people who had listened to him, and he had sensed that they were accepted what he said emotionally while he was talking to them. But then in his letters he says, what's wrong with you? You've abandoned what I've said, because they didn't buy. And ultimately, Paul died miserable and alone, and if it wasn't for other people taking his letters and emoting vocally about them, Christianity would never have existed.
No. But the same thing is true of the European or the English kings in particular are all sold on God and King. I mean, that's about as emotive term as you can come up with, to these people.
Why do you think that churches spend so much money creating this environment that instills confidence and that they create, they have all the songs and the music and the preaching and the ceremony and these gorgeous buildings.
Hello? Hello?
Yeah.
Oh, we've been dead for a minute. I'm sorry.
Oh, okay. So I think, you think of Christianity. Why do they have these, glorious, gold-clad, beautifully adorned, I think it's disgusting myself, but have all of these ceremonies and all of this music in these fancy buildings? Is it not to make people feel like they're being godly, like this is uplifting?
Sure. It's all salesmanship.
Right.
It is. I can't find anybody until we get to the other side of the coin, everybody is totally against the Torah.
Now, I would ask you this question.
Yeah.
Yahowah to articulate his Torah? Did he pick somebody who was slick of speech, who could turn a phrase and really wow the crowd?
No. Not if you talk about Moshe.
Yeah. It was a stutterer.
Can I
Pardon?
May I jump in for a second?
Sure.
Applying this to the conversation I had with a friend the other day who, reviews everything through her very sort of I say there are like white-collar pseudo-intellectual know-it-alls, and there are blue-collar anti-intellectual know-it-alls, and then there's sort of trying to be honest and intellectually honest in between. But she was like appealing to this simplicity thing and feeling the love and all that stuff. And so this issue of knowledge and truth versus the love thing. I want to make the point that certainly Yahowah is loving. There's no doubt that Yahowah is loving. Conan even goes so far as to say that's an agape. God is agape love. But that's not our notion of love necessarily. We kind of try to mitigate this with a term like tough love, for example. And so Yahowah's love is tough love that is based first in truth.
Right.
And when we think we know what we're talking about, and it can be hard to accept correction or accept the notion that our ideas are wrong. And so this woman was giving me this thing like, when confronted with doctrinal truths or logical truths or Torah truths that people aren't prepared to really think about, they might say, I'm not feeling the love. And what I thought relative to her is, that's the Beatles. All you need is love. And that's when the LGBT community, for example, would say to her, well, we're not feeling the love from you because you have all this icky-poo Christian doctrine that says we have to be saved from sin and we have to believe in Jesus. And I'm not feeling the love because you're presenting me with, ideas that are dissonant, creating dissonance for me. Right. So she didn't seem to grasp that some of her argument was based on specific things she assumed to be specific truths that come before the feelings. So this all ties together. I mean, Yahowah's instructions are truth. And, and he provides them because he is loving.
Yeah. Is it possible to love a false god?
I would think so.
Sure. You can love a tree.
Muslims love Allah because Allah's not lovable. But the Christian Jesus is a lovable fellow. And so it's a false god. But Christians emote genuine love for this false god. Don't you think that throughout human history, humans showed a degree of loving devotion to all the various false gods? I mean, there was a lot of really cute, nice ones.
I can illustrate the implications of this very powerfully as a nurse.
Okay.
There are a great many people who love their family members dearly. And because they don't grasp truth, they submit them to treatment regimens which harm or kill them because because they lack truth, but they they do what they do in love and end up with a negative outcome.
Right. As opposed to understanding. Yeah. Knowledge and understanding. Well, that's a beautiful example. And so what Yahowah, to preclude that, says that first he wants us to come to know him. The whole purpose of the Torah is to introduce himself to us. So we come to know him as he really is, and then he wants us to understand what he's offering and how to participate in what he's offering. So you make the transition from knowing to understanding to wisdom, which is acting upon the understanding in an appropriate way. That's what Yahowah wants. And once you come to know him, and once you come to understand what he's offering, and once you choose to engage in it, then you fall in love. But you ought not fall in love before you know who it is that you're talking with.
Right.
And so Christianity puts the faith and the feeling before knowledge, and it's like Teo, the linebacker from Notre Dame, that fell in love with a guy who was pretending to be a girl online. Had a love affair with an imaginary person. It happens all the time in religion.
But conversely, if these these people who we've been talking about in the followers, or these are the people that have been using that emotive or that emotional tug, their hook to find the following. You don't find that really. I'm not aware that we find that in Abraham or Moshe. I mean,
no, we don't.
Hook there. I mean,
no, I don't see. Did you see one place where Abraham says that, oh, I dearly love God. Oh, how much I love God. Do you ever find from Sarah, oh, man, I just really love you, God? Do you ever once read that?
Well, it's certainly not couched in the terms that we use.
No, I mean, Yahowah tells us all about his conversations with Abraham and with Sarah and his interactions with them. Everything he has to say is guidance. It's revelation and guidance. He never once tells us, I just love that guy. And he never has Abraham or Sarah, boy, I really love that God. Ever? No. So for participating in the covenant, love is not required. Now, Yahowah says, you know, we ought to prioritize coming to know and love him. But, you know, you do that by first coming to know who he is, so that you can actually love him as opposed to some myth, some false impression of who he is. Look back to the last segment of Shattering Myths. Kirk, I think you're right. Everyone that you have listed will definitely serves as a model for the Torahless one. Glenn, you're right in that very few religious people have ever transitioned from knowledge and understanding to emotion, but instead reinforce their faith with emotion and never get beyond it.
And I'd like to point out that much of the way you convey Yahowah's motivation and his concern is in the model of parental love. Well, parental love is concerned with having a child, keeping your child safe, imparting knowledge and understanding and wisdom to the child for their own well-being. And
do you show a child love by coddling it in such a way that it has no hope of ever being independent and being able to make good choices on his or her own?
Negative. You want to facilitate their growth and responsibility.
Correct. And you can facilitate their growth and responsibility by teaching them. That's why Yahowah, began his introduction to us in a book called Teaching. It may be among the top priorities, if not the top priority, in raising a child, is teaching that child so that they're equipped to know, to understand, to make good choices. What thing is more important? Other than feeding them so they don't starve and putting a shelter over their heads so they are out of harm's way, what is more important than teaching that child?
And unfortunately, putting a roof over their head and taking care of them is precisely what the state wants the function of the parent to be, while the state provides all ideological indoctrination.
Yes, correct. That is correct. And then it gets back to what I think is the most popular religion in the world today, which is social secular humanism, in the sense that while it does not have a God, Buddhism doesn't have a God either, it serves as a religion in the sense that it has indoctrination, it has its doctrine, it has its moral code, it has its sense of how people should respond and what is considered a value versus being caustic to society. So, it's extraordinarily judgmental, this social secular humanism, and that's what the state wants to indoctrinate most people in. And what it has rendered them, by the way, Kurt and Glenn, is incapable of making the transition from knowledge to understanding, and completely bankrupts their capacity for wisdom.
Now, if that's a prerequisite for all of these things, otherwise the con job can't work.
That's correct. Now, you have to think your way to God. That's just all there is to it. You have to think your way to God. He laid it out that way, and he did so because he wants to spend eternity with people who enjoy thinking. It doesn't say you have to be particularly smart.
No.
It just says you have to enjoy the process of thinking.
Oh,
And if you don't enjoy the process of thinking, he says, he's just letting you know you don't belong in heaven because you're going to hate the place. So it's God's idea of fun is doing the same thing that I viewed as fun with our children. We would go take vacations that were educational trips. Now, we did all the fun stuff on them. But going off and doing things and exploring with your children is the stuff that you remember. That's the fun stuff. That's what Yahowah wants to do with us.
Yeah.
And do you think he wants to be around somebody who would say, no, let's just wallow in emotion?
Right, exactly. One last thing before I go here.
Yeah.
Had an interesting weekend, deliberately, like, having conversations with people. I had 3 very edifying conversations with these people, deliberately going to the effort to refute, revile the paganity of Easter. It was really liberating.
Wow.
Many times. I mean, it was, it's like, look, Tony saying, look, I can't stand this anymore. I mean, the word Easter, the name of a pagan goddess, just like you said,
right.
Cringe. It's just real. I just cannot,
right.
kind of go along.
And the fact that it's a Sunday and that it's a Babylonian religious ceremony,
right.
And not even disguised, and the fact that it's used as a counterfeit for Pesach, Matzah, and Bikurim. I mean, wow.
It's just ridiculous.
The fact that it has an egg-laying bunny that came right out of the pages of the Babylonian religion. The fact that it has an Easter ham that came right out of the pages of the Babylonian religion. I mean, you can't be more pagan than Easter Sunday. With Easter bunny.
I did eat some ham, I must admit. I'm sorry about that.
That's funny. Eat whatever you're thoughtful about. Just don't do it in a religious setting. Thank you, guys. We'll be with you tomorrow. May God bless.